Okay, so for part 2, we're going to continue with this football coach app, and the part that we're going to add, the functionality that we're going to add, is the add players, in which, if you've watched the demo video, the coach can add some players and can also add the goals that they've scored for maybe the last 3 matches. Now, in order to do this, we're going to declare what's called a dictionary. A dictionary, if you've looked through the PowerPoint, and always feel free to go back to the PowerPoint and look at how to do something. You can look up the code, but a dictionary is a very clever little thing. We're going to declare player underscore info and make a little empty dictionary. Now, I just want to point out that this particular dictionary has been declared as a global variable. If I declared it inside the main menu or anywhere else, such as inside add players, it wouldn't be accessible to every other function in the program, and we want it to be accessed, so I'm going to make it a global variable. Sometimes it's better not to have global variables for the simple reason that they could be changed easily. It's difficult to debug, but for our purposes now, we're going to use a global variable. That means I can refer to it here, and that will be absolutely fine. So in add players, let's do something quite simple to demonstrate how a dictionary works. So I'm going to first ask for the name of a player, and I'm just going to say enter player 1. And just to show you how the dictionary works, if you remember from the PowerPoint or from what you've been taught, a dictionary always has in it, so if I was sort of showing you the output of a dictionary, it always has what's called a key, followed by a colon, and a value. And these are fantastic because you can look up the key and it will return you the value. Now in this case, if you think about it, the player is the key, and the value is going to be the goals. So let's demonstrate how that's going to look. So first of all, I have my little dictionary up here, which is called player info. I'm now going to give it a key value, which is in this case player 1, because that's going to be my key. So player 1 is going to be the key, and the syntax with which you do it is just it's going to be like an index number, so player 1, and remember you're assigning the key to a value. In this case, let's just say that player 1 has scored 3 goals. Let's keep it really simple, and let's print this little dictionary, see what it's doing. This is just to demonstrate how it works. So if I press play and I press 1, I'm going to add a player called Jonathan, and you can see that it sort of prints the dictionary in this format, Jonathan 3. Now this would easily allow me to search for a player. I'd look for the key Jonathan, it would return 3, and so on and so forth. But the difference here is that we don't want just one player, and equally we don't want just one goal. We would like 3 matches, the results of 3 matches, and obviously you can only have one player for the goals. So the actual setup of the dictionary would be something like this. It would be player, the name of the player, it could be player 1, player 2, or whatever it is, let's use Jonathan, and it would be the goals that he scored for match 1, the goals that he scored for match 2, and the goals that he scored for match 3. Now how could you, obviously this whole thing has got to be a value. In a dictionary you can only have keys and values. So how would you store all of these as a value? And obviously one answer is to have another dictionary. You can have what's called a nested dictionary, or you can store it as a list, something like that. So this is the key, Jonathan, and the value is the different matches. Now how would you set this up? This is quite complex. How would you set this up in this function to work? So let's have a look at a possible solution. So first of all, we want to ask the coach how many players he would like to set up in his little system. I'm going to make that there we go. And then Just for the sake of simplicity, you can use a little string manipulation. You can do this much more simply, or you can use this. You can say entering, again, refer to the string manipulation PowerPoint to remember what this does. But something players. Now, what is this little percentage sign going to do? It's simply going to add whatever you put in next. So I'm going to put in that, and I'm going to say num players, which is referring to this variable here, and that will just simply print out the number of players. Let's just see what it's doing so far, and we can see that there's a mistake here. Let's have a little bit of troubleshoot just to see what's wrong. So it says print you are entering percentage players, and I should be adding a little s there because this is a particular syntax that they're looking for, and again I'd encourage you to look back at the PowerPoint. So what have we done wrong? Now this is an interesting one, and I always get caught out by this. Now I was just looking, is there any mistake in this line? And actually there's not. So the mistake is in the previous line. So if I add a bracket there, and this does often happen, so if you're looking for a mistake in a particular line, it does say line 38, actually the mistake is in the previous line. So if I try that now, it should work. Enter the number of players you wish to enter, say 3, and it does indeed say you are entering 3 players. So let's continue with our code. Now I'm going to add, remember what we said, that we're going to have a dictionary in the format Jonathan, and the value is going to be a list in which there's going to be 3 goals that they've scored for the various matches. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to set up the list, which is going to be called, let's call it player data, and within this list let's have a little heading for each one. We'll call it match 1 goals, match 2 goals, and finally match 3 goals. And here we use a very beautiful for loop, which is going to loop through the number of players, whatever has been entered by the user, from 0 to the number of players, and it's then going to ask for that amount of player names. So let's demonstrate how that looks. So I'm going to say for I, remember this I could be anything, it could be X or item, in range, starting at 0 and going up to the number of players, we would like to ask the user to enter a player name. So if the user has, the football coach has asked for 3 players, this is going to print 3 times and ask for 3 different players. But we also need to ask for the match information. So here we can have, first we're going to put in to the dictionary, we're going to actually mention that the player name is going to be the key, and assign that to the dictionary, and we're doing all of that in the loop. And then we're going to have another loop. So this is quite complex. It's called a nested loop, a for loop within a for loop. I'm going to say for entry in player data. So now this is literally saying for every single entry in the list player data, which is going to be match 1 goals, match 2 goals, match 3 goals, have a little colon there, reference the dictionary, which is the player info, put in the key, and put in the entry. Now remember, this is referring to this match 1 goals, match 2 goals, match 3 goals. Put in the entry for each thing in the list. It's going to ask the user for match 1 goals, match 2 goals, etc. and then ask them for an integer input, which is going to be stored in the list. Okay, so for entry in player data. This is quite difficult, but it's useful to know the way it's done, and obviously you could reuse this snippet as long as you understand it. So that's just giving me a little, this print is just going to give me a bit of space. Now, if I run that, let's see what happens. If I add 3 players, it says enter player 1, match 1 goals, well Jonathan scored 5 goals, 3 goals, and then 1 goal. Now I've asked for 3 players, so it's going to give me this information 3 times. I'm going to put in somebody else. Let's make this person amazing, which is a bit unrealistic. And finally Ruth. Let's have Hannah, who scores very badly, and it takes me back to the main menu. So what we've done is we've added the functionality for add players, and we're going to move on in part 3 to do the rest of the functions.